from the floor is welcome and allowed before on our agenda. When comments from the floor are made, you must first be recognized by the mayor, second state your name and address for the record, and third you'll have no more than 3 minutes to state your comment or concern. There are copies of the agenda available at the back of the room. There's also a sign-up sheet if you wish to speak on the floor items. And please turn your cell phones off. Thank you.
Lieutenant, could you make sure that microphone is on too, please? All right. Accept a motion to approve or amend the meeting agenda for tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rickard.
I would actually like to pull out 1.7 and 1.9 of the consent agenda and add it to council items as C and D.
Any other amendments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the amended agenda? I'll move.
Second.
Any motion is second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Lieutenant.
Well, good evening, everyone. Present the Sheriff's Office report for the month of June 2017. During the month, deputies responded to 143 calls for service, and 6 of those were to bar none. And I wanted to let you guys know, after our last council meeting, I did meet with staff from bar none, along with our patrol division lieutenant, and got some feedback on maybe why some of the things are happening there that are where we were seeing that increase for calls for service. And it sounds like they had an audit not too terribly long ago, which they had to change some of their the way they did business based on the audit, and that resulted in a increase in calls for service. I also learned that a lot of a great majority of the people that are there on Department of Human Services holds and not corrections holds. And if you don't know the difference, which I didn't either until a few years ago, there's different criteria for how the staff can deal with somebody that's there on a Department of Human Services hold versus somebody that's there on a Department of Corrections hold. And if they do things to violate the procedures that they're supposed to use with those clients, it jeopardizes their licensing status. And there's not a lot of, they set the framework for how the staff members can truly work with those kids. So some of the things they don't have a lot of control over. So when we were talking with them, I did ask them, so what can you and what are you going to do to try to reduce the amount of issues that you're having here? After their audit, they found some things that they can do. They're going to try to do some more early intervention to maybe take down the stress or excitement level of the clients that are having problems that ultimately lead to us getting called to bar none. They're going to try to identify those things earlier and find some other interventions to try to deal with that before they get so far out of hand that they end up calling for us. They were very willing to talk, and when I asked if there was any message that they wanted the city to know, they were very happy about that, and I'm not sure, but seemed a little bit surprised that the city would take an interest in what's going on there. But I let them know to open a dialogue with the city. If there's things going on out there that are increasing issues out there, that it would be good for them to also speak directly with the city. But I also let them know I would deliver a message tonight so that you guys knew that there were, they also know that there was an increase, and they're trying to identify ways to counteract that. And we're also going to try to meet probably towards in the fall here to kind of see how things are going for them and if some of the fixes they're putting in place are gonna be working. So, just a couple of incidents that I wanted to point out. I heard as we were speaking before the meeting that, you know, we've got some scam and fraud issues going on. There were multiple scam and fraud type issues that went on this month again in the city. It's common everywhere, but it just shows that even in a smaller, more rural community like now, then it does happen. This month I probably saw 3 or 4 different types of scams, everywhere from financial card transaction frauds to identity theft to just plain old swindles where they're trying to swindle people out of their money. So again, just take whatever, urge the citizens, whatever you guys can do to try to safeguard your identity and your financial information will be best for everyone involved. Because there's sometimes very little that we can actually do to track down these suspects. And then just another sign of summer, wanted to point this out as it was an interesting call. On the 5th of June, a complainant had been at Twin Lakes Park and wearing a sundress and found a male taking pictures of her while she was seated, trying to take pictures of her up her sundress. And I only tell that to people just, again, we're in now then, but these things happen everywhere. And this person was actually sharing the picture after it was taken with other people. It was nice, the person who had the picture taken of them called us. The deputy that responded was able to identify the person and actually cited him for disorderly conduct. So just a reminder, it's a small town and has a great atmosphere, but there are people out there, and this wasn't a now then resident that was causing the problem. So, and then I wanted to update you guys. I just did today get the preliminary information on the 2018 contract proposal for police services, and I'll email that to Corey probably tomorrow or Thursday. But just a very quick review, just so you guys are aware, I originally had said I think anywhere from a 7 to 10% increase, and after looking at it and retooling, the labor cost did increase, but what we were able to do is go into the contract at other places like fuel and other things, and things that prices are lower now and in previous years, and reduce that. So we're actually looking between a 2 and 3% increase. So it's much better than expected. But as soon as I can, I will get that emailed out to Corey so she can share the actual proposal with the council so you guys can see it. And then I just wanted to let you know, next month I won't be here. I'll be gone on vacation, but one of the patrol sergeants will be filling in for me. And the way, right now we're still working on it, but like today Corey didn't get our calls for service information. And one of the things with this new system, it doesn't generate that information until the 10th day of every month. So I didn't get it till this morning, and I didn't know Corey didn't have it, but so next month on the 8th for the council meeting, that information won't even be there, so you guys will get it after the council meeting. And I've inquired to see if there's a reason why that can't be changed to earlier in the month, but right now I'm told it's the way the system is set up, and it gives the system time to, if there's reports that hadn't been categorized right, it gives time for it to be reviewed before everything gets sent out. So if I can make it sooner, I will, so it doesn't inconvenience the council, but that's kind of where we're at. And that's all I have.
Council, have any questions or comments for Lieutenant? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to planning and zoning. I'm sorry, floor items. Brandon Ebert, if you would come to the podium, please, and give your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Brandon Ebert, 9157 Burns Parkway. I'm here to bring something up with the 2030 land use plan and the 2040 land use plan going forward. There seems to be a process in place for these change in zoning, and the process is all set up for the person or business requesting it, and the city seems to guide the applicant as to which hoops to jump through. What is the process for a resident or non-applicant to stop or halt the change or amendment request? Speaking or writing a letter in opposition during a public comment period seems more of a formality hoop for the applicant instead of the non-applicant in opposition. We in opposition need a process of hoops explained to us by the city, or really it is a one-sided affair where the applicants jump through their hoops, dot their I's and T's, and the city hands are tied and the applicants get what they want. Is there a petition needed? If so, how many signatures would be needed to halt an amendment? Is there a permit needed to solicit in Now Then? I know permits are needed for solicitation in Elk River. I don't know about Now Then. I know Otsego is also in a similar situation at the moment, with residents trying to halt an amendment to a zoning change there relating to a gas station truck stop next to a residential area. Those applicants have retained a lawyer, and is that something the non-applicants in Now Then need to do? Do we need to retain a lawyer? Thank you.
I will say that normally we don't respond to floor items immediately because we come in unprepared. It's the first time I'm hearing it. I don't know that I've ever heard that there's a requirement or a permit for soliciting in Now Then. Anybody aware of one? So we're not aware of any requirement. I would say, following what's been happening in Otsego with the truck stop, I would hope that we can communicate more effectively than requiring people to hire a lawyer and complicate things. People who own property have the right to request use. The city retains the right to deny that usage. It certainly was within somebody's right to communicate. I think it's incumbent on the city to be the most effective as we can in communicating. And we did stumble out of the block on this last one because it may have come as a bit of a surprise that it was an amendment to the comp plan as opposed to a suggestion for an update that's in the process over this next year. But there will always be public hearings. Any land use change requires public hearings where the public's invited to weigh in on those. The comp plan update will also have open houses. We are discussing other means of communicating electronically, potentially through surveys. So we will be soliciting people's input and advice. And hopefully our process is open enough that everybody understands the accountability aspect of it. And as I said at the planning and zoning meeting, I think it's important that the process be open and effective enough that everybody involved feels respected. Whether the land owners and potential developers don't get their way or do get their way, they feel respected if they're denied, that they got to communicate what they were desiring. And certainly the people who invested in the community with certain expectations of how the community was going to be developed, we aren't all going to be able to control that forever going forward. but there should be a process where everybody gets a chance to communicate and feel respected and know they were heard, that it wasn't just a formality that had to be done. So the proof is going to be in the pudding. You know, obviously, there is heightened awareness and sensitivity right now, and so we welcome that accountability. Again, we have the YouTube for people to follow what's going on in all of our meetings, and we have the website. We have our council agenda and minutes available electronically. So we do expect this to be a very open process, and the decision-making and our votes as a council. You know, the only elected people are the council sitting here. The people at the commission and committee meetings are appointees. They're volunteers. And for some of them, they're still in the learning process. So I would ask for some grace and mercy as we all learn together. But these are, the five of us here are the accountable ones. We're the ones that are elected, and we're the ones that will be voting on it. Nobody else votes on it. So we will take into account the feedback from residents, the feedback from property owners, and what we look for in our comp plan, and be held accountable to the comp plan. So the process for opposition development is that, you know, you certainly can write letters. All of our phone numbers and emails, I think, are on the city website. They certainly have been in some of the newsletters. We are available for discussions with residents. So there is a means to communicate and then again, follow the discussions, come to the meetings or follow it on YouTube to make sure that you're aware that you've been heard. But as far as anything formal, we don't have a formal process for that I'm aware of. And Clayton Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start off with, I apologize, the RCA that we spoke about, I couldn't find it online, so I don't know how to get that form, if it is even a form. So I'll try to go briefly over some of the items that I had. Specifically, going into the budget items, I had three things that kind of popped out for me. Was, and the sheriff lieutenant touched on it, is kind of the third quarter, what we paid 58,000, a little over 58,000 for, and it sounds like it's going to increase for 2018. My comment towards the budget part of this is, sounds like it's going to increase, and I mentioned a little bit ago, I had 20 years of service for police in Brooklyn Park, and through my experience, we had two Bill's Superettes, we had standalone liquor stores in our city, residents of 80,000 people, and they were butted up to residential. I would defer to the lieutenant if he would want that commented on, but from my experience, you're in the southwest corner of a community that you have a contract car that I've been a resident for 5 years, and I haven't seen one Anoka County Sheriff Deputy on 184th. Not one. That will change. I guarantee it. If a standalone liquor store and a standalone gas station is allowed in our community. And the other one that was just under it was the asphalt concrete solutions. It was $7,500. And I don't know how that's covered, but I encourage any council member, if you want to come home or on your way home, I know it'd probably be out of the way, but take a stroll down 184th. And I'd encourage you to get your money back if any of the $7,500 went to the striping. And I enjoy it because it's like speed bumps. And I came here 5 years ago to tell you about my child that is hard of hearing, and I want a deaf child signage. So I don't mind it because it slows traffic down. But looking for the budget. The next thing, last thing, is the planning company. My question to you, it looks like June 2017. It's a $6,434.45. My question is that a month that we're paying for a contract for planning and zoning? Because that speaks to the current issue with the Rossler and Rademacher, that I can see where this would just explode. To me, it's something that I did my homework. I was single before I came here, but I was married, got 2 kids, so I did my homework. I did the 2009 comprehensive plan, where Now Then was. I specifically chose that piece of property because I knew that my kids were gonna go to Twin Lakes. I knew that I was in a horse community. I knew I could only buy 5 acres where I was. But again, it's hooked to 7 miles of riding trail. The comp plan, as it's continued and went from 2030, it seems like an easy thing to me to, if you get this application, I know it's $1,200, deny it, move on, go somewhere else. And Rossler, I point to the specific thing where he came on and made a complaint. It's an ABC News article, February 19th, 2016, where he went after the city planner and saying a simple lot split, that he's trying to help out a local farmer, get his, start, and that it cost him $3,862.20 to do a simple lot split of 40 acres, give him the 10 that had the house, the 2 outbuildings, and the grain silo. Well, I'm not a farmer, but I know many farmers. I can't think of now his position after making a complaint, after taking so long, and having all these developments and properties that in Elk River that he talks about, and how Liz has handcuffed him and made a complaint that he can't develop in here. Well, it's not true. It's just where he's picking, and now you're taking a local farm boy that you're trying to help out, and you're going to take his 30 acres that's closest to him and turn it into commercial and residential above that? I can't think of a worse idea to do to help out a local farmer. He's going to have to take his machinery that much farther to do his farming. It doesn't make sense. And there's many other, we've kind of at the planning and zoning covered the other issues of where commercial currently is and where it's available. Go there. I think that should about wrap it up. Thank you. I'm sorry if I
Yeah, one
went
question.
over. Certainly.
You made a comment about a local farmer, farm boy, and 30 acres. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
So Mr. Rossler, in February 19th, 2016, an ABC News article, when he initially did the lot split, the 40 acres, he did the 10 acres and 30 acres. Okay? He sold.
That's over on 22 and 47. It's completely different property. That's his own house. He has a agricultural cluster in the corner of his house.
Okay, I can't keep track. He owns so much property, then
That had
that's my
nothing to
fault.
do with this.
Okay, that's but it still has something to do with this, because he's making a complaint against the planner and saying that she's handcuffing the city, and it should have been a simple lot split, but now he had to pay $3,800, and he doesn't have this problem when he goes to Elk River and does Miskey Meadows. He doesn't have this problem when he goes to Oak Grove and does whatever, and he claims that, oh, look at all this tax base I'm bringing, and well, go, fine, keep going. Don't come here. We don't want you. We're sticking to the logo, City of Now Then, where it still feels like country. That's where we're going to stick to. We're good. And like the lieutenant said several times, God, I just want to remind you, you wouldn't think it would happen here. Small town. How many times do you reference that? Said it over and over again. And I want to remind people that you put a standalone liquor store and a gas station there and butt it up to residential, he's going to be, himself and his deputies are going to be very busy.
Thank you, and I was very lenient. We do have a 3-minute limit.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
But again, I will reiterate that nothing's going to happen on that corner or any other public activity without a public hearing and the opportunity for residents to weigh in on both sides of the issue. But it will be certainly considered. It may feel rushed right now because there's this desire to get things done, but the wheels of government turn amazingly slowly for a reason. It's other people's property, other people's money. And
Actually-
we want to make sure that,
If I may, I'd argue that point because of my experience when I was single and lived in Big Lake Township. It took one special meeting at a township board to take 260 acres that was landlocked, that I lived on a cul-de-sac, and turned 60 acres free. One special meeting, a developer came in,
well.
That was
we-
it.
We intend to be much more deliberate than that.
and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, now we can go on to planning and zoning. Had conversation with Mr. Rademacher today. He has just received his numbers on his property, and he's still weighing his intention as to whether to go forward or not, depending on what makes sense financially. And there is some additional discussion regarding the access to our parking and whether a single access is the right way to go in a parking lot this size. And we do not have any numbers at this point. Shane's out of town until the end of this week. We have no numbers on what it might cost the city and what Mr. Rademacher is intending to pay for if he's going to proceed at all. So I would move that we would table item A, the conditional use permits, until the August meeting. Until Mr. Rademacher can understand his numbers and decide if he's going forward. And we could have an idea of our own numbers.
I would second that.
A motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ricker.
You know, based on the conversations, after reviewing the video of the workshop, you know, I did have concerns, you know, with, you know, I guess I'm supportive of the project, so, but to me, if the project goes through, it shouldn't be at any cost to the city. You know, comments were made about, you know, if we're allowing him to excavate on city property, one of the comments was about seeding and what seed to use and what the cost would be. We shouldn't pay that. If we're allowing him to excavate on city property, he should seed it how we want it seeded at his cost. Another comment was made about trees and what we should do with trees. And if we don't deem that we should put trees over here, we should move them to Twin Lake Park. I'm 100% opposed to that. You know, we talk about all these businesses and screening requirements that we have for them to segregate kind of the business between other entities. We have a park here. I think and the park right now is screened very nice from that lot. That same thing should happen if this project went through. So again, my whole perspective here is the parking lot too. I think it's a bad idea to close up that. You know, it can create major issues. If we get that parking lot full, there's nowhere to turn around. So that's another issue. But again, other than possibly drainage and improvements that we deem that we would need or want to make, I think most of any other costs should go back onto Mr. Rademacher and not the city itself.
And I do believe the way his report's written, that he would be responsible for the improvement to the drainage. We would be responsible for the maintenance, which is reason one. He would be responsible for the access, the additional access to the south. Obviously, we'd have an agreement as our ability to maintain it and responsibility to maintain it, but the initial cost, my understanding, is part of what he's evaluating from his perspective. Does that make sense? To upgrade the sewer and put in the access and do everything else that he's doing. I'm sure that high-speed diesel pumps are not cheap. So I don't know what his ultimate costs are, but he's just gotten them, he expects to respond to the city this week.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
to Councilmember Rickard's comments on the trees. The purpose for me bringing it up was that I wanted to make sure wherever those trees got placed, it was the best place for them. We had a plan, it showed it on the plan, but is that truly where we want them to be? And by determining a dollar amount for what's been removed, what needs to be replaced, putting in that in escrow, that gives the city and Park and Rec the ability to look at where is the best place for that. And I did mention Twin Lakes, and I'm not saying that's where I want them, but at least that gives us the ability to determine where they are. I like the buffer that we have there. I don't see a buffer from here to the park. I like to people can see it as they drive by on 5 if they're looking for it. And my Twin Lakes was if a storm goes through and takes down all the trees, it gives us the ability to replace them. But I just wanted us to have the ability to not be pigeonholed into what was on the picture and have the ability to look at where is the best place for placement. That was my thought there.
And I agree that the buffer that's there from a major intersection and a park, we like the idea that it looks like a park. And so I would prefer the trees to be along that south edge of the park. And to that point, at the workshop, we discussed meeting with Mr. Rademacher and with the chair of the park to see what trees could be saved rather than start over with smaller trees. If there's any of those that can be saved, we should say we want those, and then here's the other ones that'll be replaced, and take a look at where it's a buffer from commercial zone into a park. So I think that's another justification for tabling this and getting those ducks in a row before we sign off on the CUP. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
I agree with Paul. I don't think we want to give up our access here. If this project was forward to the Rademacher property, I think we should connect to that road, so there's one access coming out. We should have 2 accesses for our property here.
Yeah, I think
And
since,
this north access is not the safest location to be pulling out onto 5. The sight distance is very poor, so for people exiting, that would be by far a better location. And as far as the trees planted in the future, you want to keep that in mind too, that sight distance triangle. It goes back further than you think. So you want to plant trees back in that line. You want them, out by the ball field and out, so.
I think they need to definitely be back west of the monument out here.
And the other question I have is if we do table this again tonight, do we have enough time in our extension to table it for 1 more month?
Yeah, I do believe we do.
I believe.
Yeah. I believe it goes out to September.
September, yeah.
I think subsequent to our discussion at the workshop, when we talked about maybe one entrance exit, there was some discussion as to emergency vehicles or a full lot. We're not accustomed to a lot being full, but as the park gets used more, as we have more, if we have workshops and public hearings and open houses, I can see that lot being filled. And if you get to the end, there's a business in Anoka where they bring people in and everybody gets to the end of the lot and realize there's no parking and everybody's trying to back up. Well, the only place you could back up here is out onto 5. And so subsequent to our workshop, it was realizations we have to have for a lot this size and this narrow 2 exits. So I think it makes sense. And it is part of the plan that was proposed to have that part of Bill's cost to put that into the new roads. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
and if we are gonna keep that access and connect that service road, now's the time to do it. I mean, while his contractor's here and doing the work, you're gonna get the best price. And, and we'll have to sit down and negotiate it. Maybe it won't cost us anything. Maybe part of it's negotiating the trees and he's gonna be doing grading on our side. Maybe he'll take care of everything, but that's gonna have to come out in negotiations, I guess, but we should connect at this point.
Yeah, I would like to see as part of that a discussion on how far west of 5 that access is. So my concern I expressed at the workshop was somebody in the right turn lane coming into that access road to Bill's, and we've seen them cut across the gravel parking lot right now. It can be a bit of a raceway. If you're pulling out of our parking lot and you don't see somebody coming in a turn lane from behind you, I want as much room there as possible, rather than somebody turning right off 5, if we were to go directly south of our parking lot and be within 20 feet of the corner. So I think part of that negotiation should be its location as well as cost. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
so to clarify with your conversation with Mr. Rademacher, that he was including the upgrade to the sewer in the cost, in his costs, as well as updating the road?
My understanding is that's the way it's written. The packet we got from his developer, that's the way it's written, that will be part of his cost.
Okay.
So the turn lane is his cost. The removal of our south driveway, if that's part of the plan, all of that's in the plan is expected to be part of his cost.
Okay, because that's a little different than the memo from the city engineer saying that the city should contribute that.
It was his suggestion it would be received well if the city chose to do that. And I haven't talked, obviously Shane's been out of town, so we can't get clarification there, but he's certainly saying that they would be responsible for maintaining the drainage underneath their road. We would be responsible for maintaining the drainage on our property. But the actual establishment, as I reread it, says they are responsible. I think our engineer was saying if we want to contribute something, we could do that. I think we, as Councilman Bettinger said, we negotiate what we want to contribute. And we do it from a position of responsibility for the residents. And if a developer wants to develop, or if a business owner wants to expand, that there's costs associated with that. And I think that's what he has to evaluate. He said that last week. He has to evaluate when the costs come in, if it's still feasible for him. Is there still payback? So. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Motion carries. Stadium Lutheran Landscape Plan.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
Based on conversation at the workshop, I would move that we accept the landscape plan as provided.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Comp plan land use update.
Mr. Mayor,
Leonard Stockman.
I did copy off today the original proposal for the comp plan update, which identifies 4 meetings at $250 a meeting, which is the typical price. We talked a little bit about neighborhood meetings at the work session. So I'm assuming that if you want to go that route, it would be at the city's cost to do the neighborhood meetings, because I'm anticipating that you'll need these 4 meetings just to review and discuss the heart of the comp plan in the various sections as we get those done. And then just to clarify for some of the residents here, the current request down on 181st and Baugh is an amendment to the 2030 plan. What we're doing is updating the plan from 2030 to 2040 as part of the comp plan update in 2018. Similar process, but a more specific location in terms of that the property owners had requested this current change.
Ms. Stockman?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, the meetings for 250, does that then include also the public hearings? So it's any open houses, council and planning meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing there'd only be, well, in that scenario, there's probably only one or two public hearing open houses versus doing, yeah, splitting up the city and doing neighborhoods,
Right, okay.
yeah.
So that includes public hearing. Open houses, public hearings.
The more I thought about it, I'm kind of questioning the need for neighborhood meetings because even though, for instance, some of the lots down by Rogers Lake are smaller, they're still considered rural lots by, municipal standards. And they all have sewer, septic and well, so I don't know. I guess it's up to you. We'd have to really brainstorm ways to get people here.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
To Ms. Stockman, as far as the meetings, yeah, neighborhood meetings are a good idea, but it is difficult to get information out to people, get people to the meetings. And given the limited locations we have to hold a meeting that would have any good number of people at it, people are gonna have to leave their homes and come somewhere. It's not like we can hold them in neighborhoods, so people have to come somewhere. So I think it would be a better use of staff time if we had the open houses at a location that could house a good number of people, and we can address questions at that time.
Right, and even if we are just sitting here, for instance, talking about the land use section or the transportation section, we could make sure the public knows they're welcome, and if they have any specific questions at that time, yeah, they can certainly be answered.
All of our other meetings would be open to the public, so.
Right.
And noticed on the website and such, so.
Other discussion on the comprehensive plan update.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
have any of the council members or Ms. Stockman had any thought amongst themselves as to when we would like to start the process of having meetings with planning and zoning? When we think we would tentatively hold public open houses, public hearings, and what would be our final date to approve? If anybody's thought about that?
I guess I also have a question. Where are we on this? The list that you gave us, has anything been started on the,
I've barely started the inventory, so I have there's an intern at Hawkinson that's been doing some mapping, update some of the maps in there, but the first step would be to get that inventory done and then have our first meeting. I would like to see no later than early October. Everybody kind of gets back into a routine and the kids are in school, and then we talk about the heart of it, which is the land use plan, because that will really guide the rest of the document. And really, I don't see huge changes. I mean, we're going to take out the MUSA, which was at one point mandated by Met Council, and then they backed off, so that's a given. And then the recent removal of the 80 acres of business-oriented land, we pretty much just need to decide, are we gonna add that back in somewhere, or are we gonna just leave it like it is?
the first item, interim update to remove LRUS? What is that?
That was related to the, let's see. I don't know that that is necessarily, I guess that was if you were going to do the map updates, taking the MUSA out as it would be basically now, but at this point, I don't necessarily see that happening. I think we can just wrap this all into one and, I mean, get going on the inventory. We all know that the MUSA is gonna come out of there. We don't have a long-range urban service area as part of our, community anymore, so I need to verify with, Met Council if that needs to wait until we adopt the 2018 plan, or if they're kind of assuming that that's already done, you know? Just because they told us it's gonna happen, I don't know how they're considering it at this point.
Right, so those hours might end up wrapped into some of these others then.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
to Ms. Leducer and to Ms. Stockman, we received the grant from Met Council. Can you refresh my memory as to how much that was for, to cover the costs?
20,000.
20,000, okay.
We will get it in two. We got 10,000 this year, and then we'll get 10,000 next year. And then if you noted in my, in the budget, the start of it, we bumped up hers, the additional 10,000 with, and then we put the 10,000 in, revenues from, for that too.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, you didn't have one?
No.
I was gonna say, I only heard it when you were talking, but you didn't have one.
Coming out of my mouth.
Races in there.
Like Gilligan on the radio.
All right, anything else at this time on the comprehensive plan update? Again, for those who have the packets there, you can see that the process is just getting started. It will be an open item, so certainly when the land use comes up, we will communicate as most effectively as we can, but it will all be open meetings. So all the planning meetings, all the information given to us from the planner will be available to the public. So, and I will, again, say if you have questions, there's a certain amount you can get from city staff, but ultimately the people who vote, who will make the decisions, are sitting at this table here. And so I would encourage you to get a hold of us personally, or come to some of the planning sessions and communicate your desires. Anybody need anything else in the comprehensive plan at this time? Okay. Encroachment agreement, I'm going to defer to Planner Stockman at this point, and if you could update us on your communication or lack thereof.
Yes, sir, I did speak with Rob Machetta today, who works for A&B Welding. He indicated to me that the Allowings did not wish to combine their lots. They would rather meet that 30-foot setback along Ferret Street for the two new lots. It was explained that the existing fence could stay where it is, and then they'd have a jog in the fence along Ferret if that's what they preferred to do. The encroachment agreement, they're agreeable to with the two changes in item number 2 and 10. Should both refer to Exhibit A rather than Exhibit B, because that is the map that shows the fence along the right-of-way lines. Now, if they're not gonna combine the lots, we'll change that map to make that change along Ferret. So really, the only outstanding issue would be the interim use permit. And as I explained at the work session, technically they are expanding their outdoor storage area with the 2 lots that they purchased. And the interim use permit for outdoor storage is typically to give the city, I guess, control and say into what type of screening is required around outdoor storage areas and where it's located. If in this case, the city is, or finds the existing type of fencing, which is chain link with the slats, acceptable, I really don't see any need to go through the IUP process because A, the fence, if we authorize it, will be located in the drainage easement, so we can't plant trees there. So that means you have to be comfortable with that fence along Nowland Boulevard and being able to, you know, have that view into their outdoor storage area, because that's what we're gonna see. I mean, they have big equipment. They do have little equipment too, or materials, but, if you're okay with that, the ordinance still does allow, chain link with the slats as an acceptable screening material. So being that, you know, if you want to do that for the L-Wellings, you need to, I think we should come up with some findings or some reasons why we are doing that, some of which I just stated. They were built before this ordinance was in effect. The location of the fence doesn't allow for tree planting. You know, we could list some others, but I guess I need to hear what you think about the situation. They have not gotten back to me. They said they would get back to me before the end of the day, and they have not, so.
I have a question, you know, we were talking at the workshop about combining the lots, and so a lot of these things were contingent on the lot combination, and I understand there's value in not combining the lots, especially if they don't want to sell one or both later. But with the lots not being combined, does that impact outdoor storage?
No, I mean, there's technically, yeah, there's a setback on side lot lines for outdoor storage. It has to be like 5 feet away from lot lines, but when we know somebody owns contiguous lots, that's not something that we're gonna make a big deal about typically. We're going to, you know, we're more concerned with the sides that front on the public right of way and how we handle those areas.
You know what, you had mentioned, I think at the workshop, about the Perkins fence being the model, if you were gonna have one, that's the premier choice. Did you ever have any discussion with the L-Wellings as to other types of fences they may consider other than chain link with slats, being that it's our main drag?
No, I haven't. They instructed Rob to work with me. I have not spoken with them directly. So maybe, I know they're not in a huge hurry to construct the fence, so maybe it's better to delay it and have some sort of a meeting, I don't know, so we can agree on something beforehand.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
this is one of the items I'd like to see put back in ordinance where they're allowed to do outside storage based on screening. These are the types of fences or the methods of screening you could use. I don't think everybody should have to go through an IUP for outside storage. If you can define it in ordinance, but if you're gonna do outside storage, this is what needs to be done to screen it. But I would have no problem with them using the same type of fence they have out there now. Either way, when you're coming down 5, when they're go through that lower area, you're gonna be able to see over the fence. So it really isn't gonna matter.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rickert.
Planner Stockman, just for clarification, based on your conversations today, and if they don't combine the lots, they would put the fence per Exhibit B, correct?
No.
No. Changes.
The, along Nowland Boulevard would be Exhibit A.
Okay, so
Right.
it's a combination.
It's a combination,
Okay.
yeah.
And then with that said, you know, I agree with Councilman Bettinger.
Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockman.
it really is a, you know, a preferential thing by the city governing bodies, how they want to handle the outdoor storage. We have an example of a higher quality fence on Perkins' property. He wanted that, he upgraded. And we have currently a request that will be coming through in July for a 10-foot fence that is also higher quality. And that too was offered up at their request, at the applicant's request. If, you know, a lot of cities don't even allow anymore this chain link with the slats. But if you are okay with that and you're good with the 6-foot height, no matter what it is you're screening, you know, that's perfectly fine. But many cities want the discretion to see, A, what is the outdoor storage gonna be, where is it gonna go, and then how do we appropriately screen it, you know? So, it's up to you guys.
And actually, we don't have an exhibit that shows the combination you're talking. Because Exhibit B shows the
Right.
setback both on Nowland Boulevard and Ferret. And A shows no setback.
So we would change Exhibit A to reflect
So you'd combine the two.
the setback on Ferret if they don't want to combine the lots. I did remind them again today, or Mr. Machetta, that if they're gonna go through a building addition, they're gonna have to combine lots. So I'm not sure what their, you know, intentions are, but
Is the lot immediately north of the building already part of that parcel?
yes. And that's not combined either.
It's not combined with what?
It's not currently combined. The lots they have are not currently combined. They have a couple under the building that I believe are combined, but the one to the north that they use for outdoor storage isn't combined with the remainder of their land.
Are the two to the west where they have their parking and their stormwater runoff
I don't-
separate parcels?
I think it is all separate.
Mayor,
Councilmember
I
Raymond.
believe had they been combined, we wouldn't have the separate yellow lines. That's telling us there's 4 lots.
Right, right. If you can see the lines, yeah, then it's separate. So, right, they've got one. Well, they originally had 4 that were contiguous. They combined the 2 under the building, so they currently have 3 lots that are separate. So you can see their parking lot goes over the boundary to the east. And that should have been a combination required back when that happened, because it doesn't meet the setback of parking and drive lane areas. Outdoor storage, I don't look at as big a deal, because you can always remove the storage and then sell it or use it for something else, but if it's got something structural on it, it's best to have it combined.
One option is to table, so we have more information from the O'Wellings or their spokesperson. It's exactly how they want to proceed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until next month.
I second that.
Motion and a second, discussion. Seeing and hearing no additional discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I move the consent agenda minus 1.7 and 1.9 previously removed by Councilmember Rickard.
Second.
Motion and second. Any additional discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville?
the only additional I have is the question you had and briefly spoke to at the beginning of the meeting, or prior to the meeting, about the expenditure for the crack ceiling. That it was questioned whether that's it for the year, and yes, it was.
All those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Council items.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
item 5E, reject the bids for the recycling center addition. I put forward a request for council action based on the recommendations of our attorney, that the city council exercises our right to reject all bids received for the addition/alterations to the Northern Recycling Center, and that the city clerk is authorized to notice the bidders of the council decision by 4:30 PM on Thursday, July 13th, 2017.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Discussion? I'll ask the clerk, is that a reasonable time? Obviously, if you can get a hold of them, but,
Yeah, I already spoke to one today.
okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Rickard?
I guess my only question then is, based on rejecting the bids, do we want to set some timetable or date on, coming up with a plan? Again, we were awarded a grant of some significant funds, towards this. So we, as of right now, if we reject the bids, which again, I'm in favor of, we need to come up with some alternative game plan.
Yeah, my understanding, based on correspondence with the attorney, is we clear this up and then move forward with.
And that's what I'm saying, is I would like somewhere in the motion for us to put some timetable in to do that.
And, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville?
I believe, and maybe I'm wrong and I didn't hit the send button, but Corey, did I not send you, shortly after sending this, another RCA with
Yeah.
what we would go through? Okay, because I don't see that on the agenda, unless I'm
It's
missing.
not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, because that would have addressed that, Councilmember Rickard, so.
It's
I don't know if
something
we're
that
willing
had
to
been
amend it.
presented at workshop, and I never got a call on it. I did get a copy of it, but I think it does address it, and since we haven't had time to all look at it, I would say it'd be appropriate to have that RCA come up in the August meeting.
That's just fine, I will send a corrected one, updated one to Corey.
So at this point, we have a motion to reject the bids and have the clerk communicate.
Mr. Mayor, is there an opportunity to speak on this?
No. Thank you, no. Any other discussion on this?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan?
I would agree that having the additional RCA for the discussion for next month, that addresses my concern brought up at the workshop. And I would say that would be adequate to just to have the discussion about what to do next.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville?
in the meantime, could we ask Corey to just send this to council so that they have what's already been? You did
Yeah,
get-
we got
okay.
a copy done.
You did, okay, I missed that then. Okay, so if you have additional suggestions, please forward them, and I can add them for next month's discussion.
All right. Vote on the motion then. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. you care to have a discussion afterwards, it will be done shortly. We should be done shortly if you. Yeah, yeah, but there's nothing official we'll do other than that. The rejection is there, but. So, the council will not be taking action, but you certainly can have the discussions. All right, feasibility study for Old Viking.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
we discussed it last month's council meeting to set up a special meeting to discuss the feasibility studies and the assessment policy. So this was RCA was suggested to be submitted to continue that discussion and to schedule that meeting.
All right, so you're motioning as requested?
One motion to call a special meeting, or?
Well, your requested council action is a special meeting to be scheduled, so you would motion that we agree to that.
Motion to agree to a special meeting with the council, mayor, city attorney, the city engineer, and involved city staff to discuss the assessment guidelines that can be used for feasibility studies.
Okay.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, discussion. I'd say if we do this, it would be appropriate to have Corey direct, either get hold of the attorney and the engineer, or have Lori do it, and see what their timetables are, and float out some dates to see what the council can do. Other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
I just hope by having this meeting that we find some type of resolution to move forward, because we've had 9 years since we became a city, and there's been nothing done to repair our roads, and something needs to be done. We can't keep studying and studying and talking and talking. We need to get some plan put together, get something done.
I think that's fully the intention of this, because nothing has been effective through our current committee structure and through our current and previous councils. I don't think any effort like this has been engaged before, and take people that do this on a regular basis with other communities our size, townships and smaller cities. I think putting a roadmap out there for us to say, here's what it takes to do this, especially with the budgeting process upon us, I think this is appropriate time to do it. And it's exactly why we're putting this group together, so we have a template to follow and the guidelines in place, so we can have a policy so that we can reasonably go out for a feasibility study. And one of the things the engineer said, we need a policy from the city. This is how we develop that, so I think this is perfectly suited for that purpose. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, so am I to understand that, first I'm supposed to contact Shane and the attorney and determine which dates work best for them, or are you guys gonna send me dates too?
I would say, let's see what works for them, and then we can see what works around, what we can do to work around that.
And I'm assuming we're talking an evening meeting as well.
I would assume so, yes. And again, as with all of our meetings, that is open to the public. We will not be engaging the public typically at that meeting, but you're certainly free to sit in, and if it's appropriate, we can get some input. But right now, it's an opportunity for us to put our policies in order so that we can have a plan to improve and maintain our roads.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just ask one other thing. Is it possible for the council members to at least email me dates that do not work for you?
Certainly can.
There's a program out there that you can send out, I can't remember, is it Total or it's something like that, that you can float a bunch of dates out, send it to everybody, and then they fill that survey out, and based on that information, you can pick the date for the meeting. I'll see if I can find it at work. I've had it.
And
I'm assuming that's probably part of Google Calendar.
I think it is.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item C,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rickard.
the reason I asked for this to be pulled out of the consent agenda was I had a couple questions on it for clarification. Number one, the RCA is asking for a quarterly report. You know, honestly, I don't know if a quarterly report is necessary due to the fact that obviously in the summer months, nothing's done. So there's a couple quarters that we're gonna have virtually nothing done, and if there is very minimal done, we would see that on staff's time cards. I'm not opposed to by any means to have some type of report, rather it, you know, biannually, however we wanna do it, showing what costs there is associated with the project. But I think quarterly is somewhat excessive, again, being certain months. There's zero activity. Secondly, I just wanted to clarify, I thought, it was my understanding that when the motion was made, that we were gonna do this for other things as well. And obviously one being Heritage Festival, because there's a lot of city time and money spent involved in that. And it was brought up months ago as far as, you know, costs that we never really knew that we were paying for that event. You know, as far as firefighter time, EMS response, staff time, you know. Again, I don't have any problems with this, but if we're gonna do it for one, we need to do it for everything. So I wanna make sure that that is being done. That everybody and everything is transparent, where we have, regardless of what project or program or event, that we are logging and keeping track of all city staff time and anything associated with that event, so that everybody is aware exactly how much city funds are going where.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
To Councilmember Rickard, you had two items. One is reason for quarterly report, because that gives us updates. If there isn't much to report, it won't take very long. But this summer, there's questions about getting bids on the concrete, the lights, well, and other things associated with the rink. So there will be some hours there, and for budgeting purposes, I think it's important that we know that. As far as the report from Heritage Festival, that committee is working on that report. And when they have it complete, they will provide it to the city. That was a requirement of the festival, receiving a donation from the city. If a council member wants to, we can only go by what we had for last year. That was the first year that we got dollar amounts from the fire station, you know, firefighters and such. If council wants to request that going forward, I'm fine with that, but that's gotta be in motion. If you want it for everything, then you need to also do a motion that includes everything, whether it be Lions, anything for the church, anything for anyone. But we would need to have that in a motion, in a request for council action.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rickard.
two things along with that is, number one, it's my opinion that the Heritage Committee cannot come up with those figures because they don't have the amount of staff time and dollars that were in the event. So that's something that would have to actually come from city staff, number one. Number two, you go back to the quarterly report and time and energy and whatnot it's gonna cost to go out and get bids. It was brought up at the Park and Rec meeting the other month, or this month actually, that we have volunteers who are part of that committee who were gonna do that, but you said they couldn't talk about it. And I went back and I talked to committee members, I reviewed the video, and That's not the liaison's role. They can talk about whatever they want. They can go, regardless if we directed staff, and that's my other point, is, and Corey made a point in the workshop, is we need to own it ourselves. We do a very poor job of when we tell Corey or anybody else, staff needs to do something. We do need to tell what staff. Because if you go back and look at that meeting, what we were asking for is staff to contact the attorney to find out if we put it on that location, if we had to dedicate that land to parkland. So the attorney was one. So it wasn't necessarily just Joe going to get bids. It was talking to Shane about getting a map for the future improvements out here, and if we put it there, how would that impact that future development? So there's a lot more to it than what's being said here, and just directing staff to go out to bids. But again, we had volunteers on a committee who wanted to and were willing to go out and do some of that legwork, but yet you refused and would not let them talk about it. And again, that is not the liaison's role.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
Councilmember Rickard, the issue of hockey updates was on the agenda. There was nothing provided with the agenda, so we had no idea what the update was, who it was going to be provided by. So I took and provided what the last two council actions were. And those council actions were, I had originally made the motion based on the Park and Rec's request that the city council place the hockey rink in the area that it was last winter. That motion died. The second motion was done by Councilmember Bettinger, asking staff to put together their suggestions as to where the rink should be placed permanently. That passed. The second motion was done by yourself, and that was to direct staff to get the bids for the different pieces of what would be necessary for a rink. I brought that as information to Park and Rec and said, this is where it stands, because that's where it stood. I also told them that at any time that they have the right to contact any of the council members to provide their opinion on what's going on. I never told them they couldn't talk about it. What I said was this was what had occurred, and that's where it stands with the council. If they have input, they can always provide input, and I told them they can always provide input. But that's where it stood. After the two motions that were made at the previous council meeting by yourself and Councilmember Bettinger, it was all laid in staff's hands. If you meant for it to be committee members, that should have been included in the motion.
There's no reason why, regardless if we say staff, we want staff to do something, that somebody else can't take their time and energy to help staff out. So so if we say we're gonna direct staff to do something, if somebody's willing to go volunteer their time and energy and do that and present it to staff, you're saying that can't happen?
I'm saying I went by what was in that motion, and the motion said staff. We can debate it all
So
day, but
let's, first of all, I think to your point, Councilmember Rickard, I do think we need to be much more specific and precise when we're asking or directing staff to engage in something. Who are we talking about with staff? And since we have the clerk treasurer here who is responsible for half the staff, we can make sure it's clearly understood, since she's in our presence, is it clear to you what we just said? And if she says no, then we need to make it clear at this meeting before we break up. And then secondly, is it clear what we asked? So who we asked? Is this contract staff? Is this administrative staff? Is this public works staff? And then what exactly are we asking them to do? I think what was asked to do was investigate other spots. And at the Park and Rec meeting, there was no indication any other spots were made or were looked at officially. So there was no feedback as to that. If that's what we were asking, we should make it very clear. You know, either define the spots we're asking to be looked at or come up with alternatives that take into this criteria. If we want to make sure that wherever they would source, where they would locate, would allow for the permanent platform for the warming house, a slab for the porta potty, accessible for cleaning, and near parking. So I think we can do a much better job as a council identifying specifically which staff and exactly what we're asking them to do. And I think we could avoid some of what we're seeing right now. So I think going forward, we should do a much better job with that. And since we didn't, we can sit here and debate it that much longer, but I think it's a point well taken. We need to be more precise in our motions and more thorough in our direction.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ricker.
And I agree to that point 100%. The other issue I do have is, again, the role of the liaison is not to direct the committees on what topics they talk about. They are there as a conduit for the communication between the council and the committee. If they so choose to discuss a topic that we've already voted on, that's their choice. They set the agenda. It's not their role. She's overstepping her bounds as a liaison, in my opinion.
Okay, and I will say, in this case, it was maybe emphatic in how it was addressed, but what, being at the meeting, what she was saying was, here's what the minutes said. So the copies of the minutes were there.
But again, there's nothing stating that just because that's how the minutes were stated, that they cannot talk about it in more detail. And again,
I will suggest one limitation on that. I do think that while there's legwork that we are expecting committees to do, as far as actual negotiation on behalf of the city, I do think that remains the purview of the staff assigned to or the council. And when we're getting committee members who are telling us that vendors are raising their prices or want more money, I don't think that's appropriate for the committees to be involved in, because they can't obligate the city financially. So legwork and research is fine, but actually negotiating or communicating increases in cost, I think is overstepping. So I think we need to make sure that's clear as well, that the committees are to do legwork and make recommendations, but at this point, unless otherwise directly authorized, would not be doing the actual negotiating or communication of price changes or agreements on behalf of the city.
and that's not what I asked. I said, there's no reason why a committee member can't go out and get a bid.
They just can't, they can't make the city accountable for it.
Correct. And nobody out there should think that regardless of your contractor or a committee member, there's nobody out there who should think that they can make that commitment for the city. It's obviously, no matter what happens, it has to become in front of the council itself and be voted on.
Yeah, and that was my concern at the Park and Rec Committee, was that the defense provider went to a committee member and said they needed more money. Well, not the committee member can't obligate the city, so they need to come to the city to negotiate that, so.
And that wasn't my point.
All right,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
I think a lot of the stuff in my motion was taken care of. The attorney was contacted and responded, and the engineer was also contacted and responded. The fire chief didn't, I don't think gave us the best location for a while, but I think a lot of the things that were in the motion were taken care of. And as far as I'm concerned, committees are part of our staff. They do a lot of our legwork for us. They're supposed to do a lot of our legwork for us. And that's how a small community like us runs with a lower budget. They want to do these things for free. That's fantastic to help us out. So I do consider them part of our staff. And our park committee is our long-range planning for our parks. Anything like this, they should definitely be weighing in as the information becomes available. So.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainbow.
Well, and actually, the Park and Rec Committee had weighed in on the location, and they suggested that, and the council voted it down. So the next step then was your motion to have staff look at it. So when I read that, that's staff, it's internal staff. We already had a recommendation from Park and Rec. Council voted it down based on needing additional information. They got it in additional information. And at the night of the meeting, I told them that, and I provided copies of the attorney's and Shane's memo, so they had all that information. And I said, I have not yet seen anything from staff saying, this is what we recommend. Well, it's in, we have it now. We have the request for council action now. But we didn't have that at the time of the meeting. And when the motion said for staff to go out and investigate costs, that's, to me, internal staff. If there's no stipulation that says somebody other than, then that's our staff. Again, it goes back to, and Councilmember Rickard said this, we need to be clear with our with our council actions. And I think the form we're using has helped because it makes you look at it and see what's there and make sure that everything is there. When we work off, just by the seat of our pants, I think then we get lax because we're not thinking things through and we're not doing it in detail. But it is something we need to work on. But again, I provided to the Park and Rec Committee the information based on the last council actions. And I did tell them that if they have any questions, concerns, they have every right to go to the council members and voice those opinions. So I call the question.
Well, there's no question at this point, there's no vote. I'll take
Was
one more
the-
comment.
And Mr. Mayor,
Oh,
that kind
I'm
of
sorry.
BS needs to stop where you get your point across and then you call for an action so nobody else can get their point. That's,
Mr.
All right, so-
Mayor,
we
so
did
at
it
this
on another
point,
topic and it just.
I will take, well, is there anything new that you want to say here?
I just wanted to clarify one more thing. You're right, the council did vote down the first recommendation, but we have received new information, and they should look at that new information and make a new recommendation, I would think, as a park committee, which is planning our park system for the future.
Councilmember Bettinger, the information that we've been provided and the location, if they talked about it a second time, would be the same as what they decided the first time,
Yeah.
based on what was provided.
But
So-
they have that additional information to make that decision, and so be it if it's the same decision they made before. But now they have the additional information. The only reason we voted it down as a council, and I was one of them, is because we weren't sure of the land use and what would happen if we placed it there permanently. That information was obtained, so then there's no reason they can't go back and discuss it and vote on it and being the same vote they had before.
All right, so I'm gonna end it. At this point, let's make certain that we're more specific in identifying which staff or committee we're asking to do what specific action is required, and when we expect to have that action completed. So I think if we're more precise with that and giving direction, we can avoid this type of scenario in the future. Is that sufficient at this point?
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I move my motion that council directs internal staff to prepare a report to include all costs, comma, or parentheses, time and material associated with the hockey rink for the period of January 2nd, 2017 to June 30th, 2017. Report should be presented to the council at the August 4th and 8th council meetings. Going forward, cumulative reports should be processed quarterly, January to March, April to June, July to September, October to December, and presented at the January, April, August, and October council meetings.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second.
Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify one thing? Is there a purpose or reason why it's gonna be presented at a council meeting as opposed to just compile the data and present it to you or just email it to you as normal? I don't know, am I supposed to put this as a request for council action form and put it on the agenda, or,
That's what I would like, yes.
okay.
So basically what you would send out to the information you would send out.
Okay, but then the request for council action forms are a request asking for action. So why would I put it on a request for council action form when I'm not asking for any action from you?
It would be a receive and file information, same as you do in packets with other stuff from, you know, Joe has sent out different things, that we get that and we read it and it's part of the packet, but we don't take any action on it.
Okay, because generally that stuff I would just stick in your box. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I added it as an agenda item as a packet.
All right,
So that's
just,
where I'm just not really clear on it.
I'd I would rephrase that, the report should be presented to council prior to the August 8th council meeting,
Could I ask you to make the word provided rather than presented?
provided, yes.
Does that make it clear, Corey? So now you're providing information, you're not making presentation or making requests.
Right.
With that being said,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Pettinger.
I think quarterly is overkill. I mean, we could get a report for this August to do the budgeting for 2018, but I think after you have 1 year's, you've gone through the process, I think once a year is, just like everything else, we don't have quarterly done on everything else for our budget. I think it's overkill and it's a waste of employees' time. And time is money.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Ryan.
I would agree down the road, but we're still in a transition about how the process works and what needs to be done, and when's the time frame to put the boards up, and when's the time frame to take the boards down, and who's doing what, and do we need to add this piece? And I certainly would say that at some point in time, we can amend this so that we would either can cut back on it or it wouldn't be needed at all. One concern I have right now is, if I recall, there's not a specific line item on timesheets that says I'm exactly doing hockey boards, and that may or may help. If there are specific things that we want to track, that they may need to be, that timesheets may need to be altered so that we can track those specific budget items easier, or any other specific things that we want to line out so that reports could be generated easier. I think right now, I don't know the exact time frame, but, you know, we do have work in this other quarter because the hockey boards were taken down later, and, you know, if there is time and effort put into researching slabs or lights or whatever, you know, we'll have that, we'll have time for now.
I'm just gonna say I agree, quarterly is excessive.
Okay.
And I just wanna note that the only reason staff had to take them down this spring was we had scheduled a date to do it, and the weekend that was planned to do did nothing but rain, so it was all mud over there. And then we were trying to reschedule a new date, and Joe had some free time and it took him 3 hours to do, so they just did it.
For the record, I was there, it was 4 hours, 4 people, so. But, just clarification, so. He did have time and took the whole team together, and they worked very well together on it, so. Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, 1.9.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rickard?
I just wanted to pull this out too, just to get clarification, based on the workshop itself. I didn't want to vote on a permanent location, but, at the workshop, it was mentioned that there was not to be any work done until certain things got done. I don't want to, obviously, if something comes up and if you direct staff to get all these bids and staff doesn't have the time to do it, I don't want this fall coming around and us not to be able to prep the site. So I want to make sure that if we do pick that as a permanent location for now, regardless of where we end up, it still gets done this year.
I do think that Joe has been communicating that he's been trying to get the agreement we had and the person that took the dirt to level out that. I think that the recommendation to have the recreational rink right east of the the hockey boards. Leveling that dirt would be an important part of that preparation. So I do think there will need to be preparation done if we're gonna be ready come late fall, early winter. So I agree that we need to focus on what it's going to take. Maybe again, that's part of the value of right now quarterly reports saying how much do we have to do in the summertime that we'll never have to do again. But right now, if we're gonna get this established, we need to do something, and there will be some cost associated with that, so.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Rick?
And the only other question I have is, you know, when we discussed it before, the actual need for specific cross footings rather than, you know, some footings to set the board themselves on. Initially, you know, when the topic first came out, you know, the comment was just to do some type of footing, if you will, if we want to call it that, to be able to set the boards on so it would be easier and quicker for setup, and then also would help contain water. It wasn't initially and thought of that we needed frost-specific footings. You know, we aren't putting a house on it, so again, I don't know if that's necessary. Obviously, if you go that route, your cost is gonna be considerably higher if you do something else. I do know other communities do set their boards directly right on asphalt, which is obviously considerably thinner than frost footings. So, you know, I would like, you know, to find out if, you know, we can also get some clarification on what would be best.
Well, I agree. Yeah, I think one of the features we have is because of the type of boards we have, the way they're anchored, you know, when the ground got soft here, they did kind of fall over. You know, many cities either have year-round board setups where they do put posts into the ground and put the boards on those and leave them up. I'm not certain how they do it on the asphalt, other than they probably put some kind of T-bottom on it and set that in there. So I do think it makes a huge difference if you're gonna put in full frost footings. But I think we need somebody in the concrete business to say, this will stay, with this type of surface preparation, this type of base will serve both the purpose of retaining the water and having a good base for these types of boards. So I think that's something that needs to be communicated to us from somebody who does it for a living. Anything else on that one?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan?
I know we've had other items where they've come to the council and there may or may not be more work to be done, and they've come from a committee or a commission, and we've, you know, basically said, yeah, this looks good, but we'd like other things done, or there's other work that could be done. Can we potentially agree that this could be the permanent location, but there's other things that if we want staff, because as recommend, right now, I would say if something is asked of staff to work on, then they're ultimately responsible for it, and however it gets done. But if we want input from Park and Rec or other committees, that we should, you know, we could certainly include them in those tasks to get that information brought back, so that it's not all just, you know.
I think, you know, it's been discussed that once the council decides that's where the rink's gonna be, it really is a responsibility of the Public Works group to do that. I don't know that there's additional input at this point from other committees or others, because as we said before, once we decided to move ahead with skating rinks, both hockey and recreational, we have to figure out as a city how that's being done. That becomes more of a day-to-day activity than the initial investigation, should we do this or shouldn't we do this? And I think the recommendation, if it's come from committee, that we like to see both hockey and recreational rinks in that general location, I think it's up to us to make that happen and not bog it down with more committee engagement that really has to do with where's Joe gonna find the time and expertise, and where's the exact layout gonna be. Because at that point, then the rest of it makes sense. Until we determine that, but it really becomes, at that point, more of a, how does Joe fit into his schedule? What staffing does he need? And to me, those aren't committee decisions, that's, between Joe and if he wants assistance from Corey, what do we need to staff this? And what recommendations we're gonna have, so.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
is that including the upkeep and/or improvements to that task?
As far as
So if we're
specific-
saying that the city is now part of Public Works, just to
The
clarify.
ranks are part of public.
So the rinks, sorry, yeah, if the rinks are part of Public Works, then any upgrades to said rinks would be, the responsibility of Public Works to maintain?
To maintain, yes.
Okay, and improvements?
If you're saying if there's recommendation, we want to add features or activities, I would say that's certainly in the bailiwick of the community, or the committee.
Okay.
If they're saying we want to sponsor events, or allow events to be sponsored, or, again, we, right now, it's considered a park and rec committee, so if there's activities there, I would say that's germane for the committee to weigh in on. But I think the actual facility itself, we have to figure out how we're gonna do it and make that part of our budgeting process. So if we have to have allotments for equipment, for ice making, for maintenance, the warming house and things like that, I think that's really the council's responsibility. Do we think it needs a slab underneath the warming house? I don't know that that's necessarily best made by a committee. That's, we get Public Works people and they've talked with the people that donated the warming house, get yourself a slab. We need to figure out how to do it and get it in our budget. Anything else on that, Councilman Rickert?
I guess, just to clarify what Councilman Ryan was saying, and I understand the maintenance and all that, but, to me, like, adding lights is an improvement. So would you consider that then an improvement as well, and would the committee look into that rather than just staff?
Well, I think that, if, with the understanding of what our ordinances, that we hold other people to on our ordinances, if there's information that the committee has that can be forwarded, suggested through the committee, I certainly will receive it from wherever. If somebody, whether they're on the committee or not, if somebody's watching this on YouTube and they say, hey, I happen to know, great inexpensive LED lighting system that meets your ordinance requirements, and I'll take that information wherever we can get it. But as actually negotiating those types of things, I think that really should be staff responsibility.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that, I don't, and again, being the fact that any recommendation any committee has, nobody can take any actions on until we vote on it, so.
No, but it, it certainly makes sense if you've got people on the committee that are in the hockey community, or people in the community that are watching this, they say, I would definitely be using that recreational rink and have some input on it. I think we welcome that in our decision-making, whether it comes from the committee or from the general public.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
so we have a request for council action here by the staff, so are we gonna move forward with that tonight, or?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rickert?
Based on the workshop and moving it to the consent agenda, I thought that
We
was
already did.
the intent.
Well,
The only reason,
intent,
again, I pulled it out was for clarification of some items. So I think we should.
So you wanna move the RCA?
Yes, I'll make a motion to designate the existing location as the permanent location for the rink.
I'll second that.
All right, motion and a second, any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
I'm still not sold that this is the best location. I think there's other areas, being this is that lot is for a future city municipal building. I think there's other options. One might be, they put it on the existing hockey or the soccer field here. that's already leveled, and hockey rink could fit in there real easily with a skating rink on the side. If we need a soccer field, there's one at Twin Lakes Park that never gets used. The people that use this one here could move down there. Or if we still feel strongly that we need another soccer field, you could put a soccer field on that lot next door here without really ruining the lot, just level it out. You throw some nets out there and there's nothing permanent. There's no cement slabs, there's no buildings that need to be moved, underground power. Once you put this hockey rink over here with cement slabs, if you put a slab under that building, you run power to it, you have some permanent structures there that you're gonna have to pay to have removed at a later date. So I think it's, in my opinion, needs to be looked at a little more.
I think that's where the debate started at the previous meeting, where the intention was to have, I believe specifically Joe, but the Public Works Group to come and say, here's the facilities we have, and we've looked at the location of the soccer field down by the ball fields, potentially down by Twin Lake Park. The criteria was access to electricity, access to parking, access to the potential for a well. If we wanted to put a well in for our fire station, they could also be utilized for the rinks. That was the intent, my understanding was to have staff look into alternates. My concern in listening to discussion at Park and Rec is none of that seemed to be addressed, other than potentially some of the spots were not good for one reason or the other. I think the other intention was to get the opinion of the engineer and the attorney and the fire chief as to potential well, potential use of that land. Does it become parkland if we put up park equipment on it? And since there is no immediate plan in our budget, in our comprehensive plan, to utilize that land for other facilities, I think the investment in the rinks in a highly visible, accessible location makes sense. And yes, there may be a time when we decide we want to build a new city hall or senior center or something there on that lot somewhere, but I think that the minimal investment we have in boards and a concrete slab for a warming house would not preclude that other usage. But I think this kind of goes back to the whole debate we had before. Are we just going to kick it back to somebody to make another decision as to where to use it? When we were meeting with Park and Rec, it happened to be a Wednesday night, there's got to be 400 kids out here. That soccer field's completely full. Our ball fields are filled. That park is utilized over here where the adults can watch them. I think to try and grade this so it's suitable for soccer and have people on both sides of the road wouldn't be as advantageous as utilizing that for rink. My opinion, again, it's up to the council vote. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what does the word permanent mean? I mean, if, as was stipulated by the engineer and the attorney, if we decide we need to do something, want to do something else with that spot, then, it's not a permanent, this will be there forever, but at least going forward for now, there's a place to put it.
So maybe I can say that if you would amend your motion to, rather than say permanent, the designated spot for our ice surfaces. And until a future time when somebody comes up with a different use for that land or a better spot for the ice surfaces, we will go forward planning on that's where the ice surfaces would be year in and year out. Is that amenable to you? All right, so moving from permanent to designated ice surface location. All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor? One quick comment. I just wanted to go on record to say that the reason why I can't be at the next budget meeting, because I had to switch plans, to switch a business trip from the previous week before the 4th till that week, and that I was very disappointed in what seemed to be the reluctance to change that meeting date.
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second, meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned. I have something to say. Jeff, you said that there was